While I was under anesthesia, my husband Carter emptied our joint account. "She won't need money where she's going," he told his mistress, transferring $250,000 to their secret getaway fund. When my family lawyer handed me the bank statements, I smiled, then remembered something Carter had conveniently forgotten. I was the sole trustee of his $4.2 million inheritance, and the withdrawal requirements were about to change. The operating room lights were the last thing I remembered before darkness claimed me. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The surgeon had been optimistic about removing the tumor, but warned me the procedure was complex and recovery would be lengthy. Carter had kissed my forehead, promised to be waiting when I woke up, and told me not to worry about anything but getting better. That was the last genuinely caring moment in our 7-year marriage, though I didn't know it yet. The pain was the first sensation that greeted me when consciousness returned, a deep, throbbing ache radiating from my abdomen, dulled but not eliminated by whatever medication flowed through my IV. The hospital room was dimly lit, the steady beeping of monitors my only company. Through the window, I could see stars against a black sky. Night then. But what night? How much time had passed? I tried to move, wincing as agony shot through my core. A soft moan escaped my lips, and suddenly a figure appeared at my bedside. Not Carter, but a nurse with kind eyes and a gentle touch. "Easy now, Mrs. Blackwood," she said, adjusting something on my IV. "I'm Connie. You've just come out of a major surgery. Try not to move too much." "Carter?" I managed to croak, my throat raw from the intubation tube, a flicker of something. Hesitation? Concern? Crossed Connie's face before she composed herself. "Your husband stepped out a while ago. Said he needed to handle some business matters. I'm sure he'll be back soon." Business matters. I squinted at the wall clock. 2:17 a.m.? Something felt wrong, but the medication was pulling me back under before I could puzzle it out. The next time I woke, sunlight streamed through the window. A different nurse checked my vitals, but still no Carter. My phone sat on the bedside table, and I reached for it despite the pain. 3 days had passed since my surgery. 3 days, and not a single text or missed call from my husband. "Nurse," I called weakly. "Has my husband been here at all?" The young man, his badge read Nick, looked uncomfortable. "I've been on shift since yesterday morning, Mrs. Blackwood. I haven't seen anyone visit except hospital staff." Cold dread pooled in my stomach, having nothing to do with my surgical wound. Carter and I had our issues like any couple, but disappearing while I was hospitalized? That wasn't just unusual, it was unthinkable. I tried calling him, but the call went straight to voicemail. Same with texts. I was about to call his office when Dr. Athena Marshall entered, chart in hand. "Mrs. Blackwood, good to see you awake. How's your pain level?" "Manageable," I lied. "How did the surgery go?" Dr. Marshall smiled. "Better than expected. We were able to remove the entire tumor, and preliminary pathology suggests it was benign. You're not completely out of the woods. We'll need follow-up scans to confirm we got everything, but I'm cautiously optimistic." Relief washed over me. Then shame at the realization that my first thought wasn't gratitude for my health, but anger at Carter's absence during such a pivotal moment. "That's wonderful news," I said, trying to match her enthusiasm. "When can I go home?" "I'd like to keep you for at least another 2 days for observation. Recovery from this type of surgery is significant, Mrs. Blackwood. You'll need substantial support at home for the first few weeks. Is there someone who can assist you?" "Carter should be that someone." "Where was he?" "My husband," I said automatically, then hesitated. "Or maybe my sister." Dr. Marshall nodded, making a note in my chart. "Rest now. We'll discuss discharge planning tomorrow." After she left, I managed to reach my sister Delia, who promised to visit that afternoon. Then, summoning my strength, I opened my banking app. Carter and I maintained separate accounts but shared one joint account for household expenses and emergencies. The screen loaded, and my blood ran cold. Balance: $47.83, just 3 days ago. That account had held over $250,000. Our emergency fund, built carefully over years, and substantially boosted by my recent bonus as executive director at the foundation where I worked. Frantically, I checked the transaction history. A single withdrawal, just hours after my surgery began. $249,972.17, transferred to an account I didn't recognize. The room seemed to spin, and not from medication. Carter had emptied our joint account while surgeons were cutting into my abdomen. While my life hung in the balance, he was stealing our safety net. My trembling finger hit the call button for the nurse. When Nick appeared, I forced my voice to remain calm. I need to make an important call, but my phone's almost dead. Could I use the room phone for a private conversation? 5 minutes later, I was connected to Eva Hernandez, the family attorney who had handled my parents' estate after their death, and who managed various legal matters for me since. "Delia, what a pleasant surprise," Eva said warmly. Then, registering my hospital surroundings via video call. "My God, are you in the hospital? What happened?" Briefly, I explained the surgery, then cut to my more pressing concern. "Eva, Carter has emptied our joint account, nearly $250,000, gone. And he's disappeared. No contact since before my surgery 3 days ago." Eva's expression hardened from concern to focused determination. "Give me the account details. I'll look into this immediately." "There's something else," I added, lowering my voice though the room was empty. "The Marshall Trust. Carter's inheritance from his grandfather. I'm still the trustee, correct?" "Yes," Eva confirmed. "After his parents died, his grandfather amended the trust to name you as trustee until Carter turns 40. He was concerned about Carter's spending habits. You have fiduciary responsibility, but significant discretionary power regarding distributions." A plan began forming in my mind, even as waves of betrayal and heartbreak crashed over me. Carter's trust fund was worth approximately $4.2 million. As trustee, I approved his quarterly distributions, generous amounts that allowed him to maintain the lavish lifestyle he'd grown accustomed to since childhood, despite his middling success as an entrepreneur. "Eva, I need you to do 2 things. Urgently. First, find out where that money went. Second, I need complete documentation of my powers as trustee. I believe it's time for a thorough review of the distribution requirements." Eva's eyes widened slightly as understanding dawned. "I'll have everything to you by tomorrow morning. And Delia, I'm so sorry about Carter. This is beyond reprehensible." After we disconnected, I lay back against the pillows, emotional and physical pain competing for dominance. 7 years of marriage, ending not with a conversation or even an argument, but with theft and abandonment at my most vulnerable moment. Yet as tears slid down my cheeks, a strange calm settled over me. Carter had forgotten something crucial in his rush to clean out our account. He'd forgotten exactly who controlled the purse strings to his family fortune. He'd forgotten that his doting wife was also a shrewd financial executive with an encyclopedic memory for contractual details. Most importantly, he'd forgotten that his grandfather had never quite trusted him, but had trusted me implicitly. "Your move, Carter," I whispered to the empty room. "Your move." The next few days in the hospital passed in a blur of pain medication, diagnostic tests, and deafening silence from Carter. Each morning, I awoke hoping it had all been a medication-induced nightmare, only to check my phone and find no messages, no calls, no explanations. Delia arrived the afternoon after my discovery, her face a mask of concern and poorly disguised. Fury when I explained what Carter had done. "That spineless, worthless," she began, then caught herself, noticing my wincing. "I'm sorry. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But how could he do this? While you were in surgery, who does that? Someone who assumed I wouldn't wake up to discover it, I said quietly, voicing the thought that had been haunting me since seeing the bank statement. Or someone who doesn't care if I do because he's not coming back? Have you called the police? Delia asked, already reaching for her phone. I shook my head. Not yet. Eva is gathering information first. Since we're married, and it was a joint account, it's technically legal for him to withdraw the money. Morally reprehensible, but legal. Delia's eyes narrowed. But the trust fund isn't joint, is it? A ghost of a smile touched my lips. No, it isn't. By the 5th day, Dr. Marshall deemed me stable enough for discharge, though she emphasized the need for continuous care during recovery. You'll need help with everything, she explained while reviewing my discharge papers. Bathing, dressing, meal preparation. Absolutely no lifting anything heavier than 5 pounds for at least 6 weeks. No driving for at least 2 weeks. You have arrangements in place? Delia stepped forward. She's staying with me. I've already set up the guest room on the 1st floor and I'm working remotely for the next month. I squeezed my sister's hand gratefully. In the midst of this nightmare, her steadfast support was my only comfort. As a nurse reviewed my medication schedule, I noticed Connie, the night nurse who'd been with me after surgery, hovering near the door, seemingly waiting for an opportunity to speak with me alone. When Delia stepped out to bring the car, Connie approached my bedside. Mrs. Blackwood, she said softly, glancing toward the door. There's something you should know? Her expression held that same hesitation I'd noticed that first night. Your husband was here the night of your surgery, but he wasn't alone. My heart, already fractured, seemed to crack further. A woman. Connie nodded. Young, blonde. They thought I couldn't hear them from the nurses' station, but sound carries in these halls at night. They were... She paused, choosing her words, carefully, discussing financial matters, quite intensely. Did you hear what they said? I asked, my voice hollow. Connie's eyes met mine, filled with compassion and something harder, indignation on my behalf. He told her, she won't need money where she's going. Then something about finally being free to start their new life. I'm sorry, Mrs. Blackwood. I debated whether to tell you, but it didn't sit right with me, keeping it to myself. The room tilted slightly, and I gripped the edge of the bed to steady myself. Not only had Carter stolen our money, but he'd brought his mistress to my hospital room while I was unconscious, discussing their future over my vulnerable body. Thank you for telling me, I managed. Would you be willing to write down what you heard? I may need it. Connie produced a folded paper from her pocket. Already did, with the date and time. I've been a nurse for 20 years, Mrs. Blackwood. I've seen all kinds of family dynamics in crisis, but this? She shook her head. This crossed a line. I took the paper, this small but potentially crucial piece of evidence, and tucked it into my purse. The journey to Delia's house was excruciating, every bump in the road sending shockwaves of pain through my abdomen. By the time she helped me into her guest bedroom, I was pale and sweating, barely able to stand. You need rest, Delia insisted, adjusting pillows behind me. Everything else can wait, but as I drifted on a sea of prescribed painkillers, my mind worked tirelessly, assembling pieces of a puzzle I hadn't known existed until days ago. How long had Carter been planning this? Was the blonde woman new, or had she been in the picture? For months? Years? Had our entire marriage been a calculated facade? I awoke hours later to voices in the hallway, Delia and a woman I recognized as Eva Hernandez. Struggling to sit upright, I called out to them. Eva entered, impeccably dressed as always, carrying a leather portfolio. Despite my disheveled appearance and the clearly unplanned business meeting in a bedroom, she maintained her consummate professionalism. Delia, she greeted me with a nod. I have the information you requested. Delia helped adjust my position and placed a glass of water within reach as Eva laid out documents on the bed. The money was transferred to an account at Pacific Coast. Dank, Eva began without preamble. A joint account between Carter Blackwood and Connie LaRue. Connie, I repeated, confused. My night nurse was named Connie. Different Connie, Delia clarified quickly. Go on, Eva. Eva placed a photograph on top of the papers. A striking blonde woman, perhaps 10 years my junior, smiled brilliantly at the camera, her arm wrapped around Carter at what appeared to be a beach resort. Constance Connie LaRue, 31, former administrative assistant at Carter's office. She left the company approximately 6 months ago. 6 months. While I was scheduling appointments with specialists, undergoing biopsies, and facing my mortality, my husband had been plotting his escape with his administrator. The account was opened 4 months ago, Eva continued. Small deposits initially, then the large transfer during your surgery. 2 days later, most of that money moved again, to a bank in the Cayman Islands. My chest tightened. He's running, Eva? Nodded grimly. It appears so. There's more. I had my investigator do some basic checking. Carter and Ms. LaRue booked one-way tickets to Grand Cayman. They departed yesterday morning. The finality of it struck me like a physical blow. While I lay recovering from major surgery, my husband was literally fleeing the country with another woman and our money. Now, Eva said, her tone shifting as she pulled out another set of documents. About the Marshall Trust. I've reviewed the terms thoroughly. You have more leverage than even I recalled. For the first time in days, I felt something other than pain and betrayal. I felt power stirring. Eva spread the trust documents across the bedspread, her manicured finger tracing key provisions as she spoke. The Marshall Trust was established by Carter's grandfather, Abraham Marshall, with very specific intentions, she explained. Abraham was old school, believed in family legacy, but was deeply concerned about Carter's financial responsibility. Or rather, his irresponsibility. I nodded, remembering my few meetings with the austere patriarch before his death 4 years ago. He'd taken an immediate liking to me, appreciating my background in financial management and what he called my sensible nature. At the time, I'd found his approval warming. Now it seemed almost prophetic. The trust contains approximately $4.2 million in diversified assets, Eva continued. As trustee, you have significant discretionary powers regarding distributions. Carter receives quarterly payments, but those are subject to your approval and certain behavioral conditions. Behavioral conditions? Delia interjected, bringing me a cup of tea. What kind of conditions? Eva's expression shifted to something almost admiring as she pulled out a specific document. This is where old Abraham showed his brilliance. Section 7, paragraph 3. Distributions to the beneficiary are contingent upon the beneficiary maintaining financial responsibility, ethical behavior, and adherence to family values as interpreted by the appointed trustee. I blinked. That's remarkably vague. Intentionally so, Eva confirmed. Abraham wanted the trustee, you, to have maximum flexibility. There's more. In the event the trustee determines the beneficiary has violated these conditions, the trustee may, at their sole discretion, modify, reduce, or suspend distributions for a period they deem appropriate. The implications began crystallizing in my mind. So legally, I could completely cut off Carter's access to his trust fund? Yes. Eva nodded. Furthermore, in cases of egregious violations, you have the authority to redirect up to 30% of the trust's annual income to charitable organizations aligned with the Marshall family values. A stunned silence fell over the room. Carter had emptied our joint account of $250,000, but I controlled his access to $4.2 million. The imbalance was staggering. He never read the trust documents, did he? I asked quietly. Eva shook her head. Based on my interactions with Carter over the years, I doubt it. He was always more interested in when the next payment would arrive than in understanding the conditions attached to it. His arrogance, Delia muttered. He probably assumed his grandfather would never put real restrictions on his money. I closed my eyes, memories flooding back. Carter's dismissive attitude whenever I suggested we review our financial arrangements. His insistence that the trust was boring legal stuff we didn't need to worry about. His grandfather's pointed questions during our last meeting about whether Carter appreciated the responsibility that came with the Marshall legacy. "There's one more thing you should see," Eva said, her tone shifting slightly as she pulled out a sealed envelope. "Abraham left this with me with instructions to give it to you if a situation ever arose where Carter's behavior called his trustworthiness into serious question. I believe we've reached that threshold." With trembling fingers, I broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of heavyweight stationery bearing the Marshall family crest. The handwriting was shaky but determined, written, I realized, in Abraham's final months. "My dear Delia, if you are reading this, then my grandson has done something to betray the trust I placed in both of you. I hoped this day would never come, but I am a practical man and have observed Carter's patterns long enough to prepare for all contingencies. When I amended my trust to name you as trustee, it was not merely because you married my grandson. It was because I recognized in you the qualities that the Marshall fortune has needed for generations: integrity, intelligence, and the strength to make difficult decisions when necessary. Carter has always had charm and potential, but lacks the character built through adversity. He has never understood that wealth is a responsibility, not merely a privilege. I hoped your influence would guide him toward becoming the man he could be. If he has proven himself unworthy of that hope, do not hesitate to use the powers I've granted you. The trust was established to sustain our family legacy for generations, not to enable self-destruction or dishonorable behavior. You have my complete confidence and my blessing for whatever actions you deem necessary." With respect and affection, Abraham Marshall tears blurred my vision as I finished reading. This letter, written years ago by a man who had seen more clearly than I had, felt like a lifeline thrown across time. "He knew," I whispered. Somehow, he knew Carter might do something like this. "Abraham Marshall built his fortune by being an excellent judge of character," Eva said gently. "He recognized something in you that he felt his own grandson lacked." I carefully refolded the letter, my mind racing with implications and possibilities. For days, I'd felt utterly powerless, betrayed, abandoned, and literally weakened physically. But Abraham's letter and the trust provisions shifted everything. "So what now?" Delia asked, breaking the contemplative silence. "You could cut him off completely." "I could," I agreed. "But that would just be reacting. I need to think strategically." I turned to Eva. "When is the next quarterly distribution scheduled?" 2 weeks from now," she replied. "Approximately $85,000. And Carter is expecting that money? Given the timing of his departure and the fact that he's set up in a tax haven with limited funds, I'd say he's counting on it. The previous distribution was 3 months ago, and based on his spending patterns..." She trailed off. "He's probably running low," I finished, "which means in 2 weeks he'll be checking his account, expecting that deposit." A plan began taking shape in my mind, not born from vindictiveness, though the hurt was still raw, but from a clarity that seemed to cut through the fog of pain and medication. "Here's what I need," I said, sitting up straighter despite the pull of stitches. "First, I need to know exactly where Carter is in Grand Cayman. Second, I need to understand every nuance of my powers as trustee. And third," I paused, a coldness settling into my voice that surprised even me. "I need to know what Carter and his mistress are saying to each other right now. Whether they're celebrating their escape or already planning their next move." Eva raised an eyebrow. "You want surveillance?" "I want information," I corrected. "Before I make any decisions, I need to know whether this betrayal was a momentary, moral failure or part of something more calculated." I know someone, Eva said after a moment's consideration. Discreet, thorough, and able to operate internationally. But Delia, are you sure you're up for this? You're still recovering from major surgery. I met her gaze steadily. Carter chose the timing of this betrayal, not me. He thought my illness made me vulnerable. He was wrong. It's made me resolute. 3 days later, I was seated in Delia's sunroom, a cashmere throw over my legs despite the warm spring air. Recovery was proceeding, but slowly. Every movement remained. An exercise in managing pain and fatigue washed over me in unpredictable waves. Still, I insisted on being dressed properly each day, a small act of defiance against the weakness that had overtaken my body. Eva arrived promptly at 11 a.m., accompanied by a compact, serious-looking man she introduced as Aaron Mercer, Mr. Mercer is a former intelligence officer who now specializes in discreet information gathering, Eva explained as Delia brought coffee. He's been in Grand Cayman for the past 48 hours. Aaron nodded tersely, opening a sleek laptop. Mrs. Blackwood, I'll be direct. Your husband has established himself quite comfortably at the Royal Palms Resort in 7 Mile Beach. He's traveling under his own name and making no particular effort to hide his presence. He thinks he's untouchable, I murmured. With good reason, Aaron continued. The Cayman Islands make it notoriously difficult to pursue financial matters legally. He's opened an account with Cayman National Bank and transferred most of the funds from the Pacific Coast account there. And Connie LaRoe? I asked, surprised by how steady my voice remained when speaking her name. Aaron tapped a few keys, bringing up photographs on his screen. Carter, tanned and relaxed, lounging by an infinity pool. Beside him, the blonde woman from Eva's photograph, wearing an electric blue bikini and oversized sunglasses, cocktail in hand. They were laughing, carefree, while I sat wrapped in blankets, managing surgical pain. They're presenting themselves as a couple, Aaron explained, scrolling through more images. Carter and Connie at dinner, walking on the beach, shopping in high-end boutiques. Based on their interactions with resort staff, they're planning an extended stay. They've booked the oceanfront suite for 3 months. My stomach tightened. 3 months. Exactly how long my recovery was expected to take. They had timed everything around my illness, calculating that by the time I was well enough to take action, they would be firmly established elsewhere. There's more, Aaron said, his tone shifting slightly. I managed to access Mr. Blackwood's email through methods I won't detail. You should see these. He turned the laptop toward me. The screen displayed an email chain between Carter and someone named Nick Farrow, Carter's college friend who had become a financial advisor, from Carter Blackwood to Nick Farrow. Subject, RE, Trust Fund. Question Nick. Thanks for checking, but I'm sure it's fine. Delia has been handling the quarterly distributions for years without asking questions. She just signs whatever Eva puts in front of her. Besides, she's dealing with major health issues right now. Trust me, she's not thinking about trust fund technicalities. Once we receive the next distribution, we should be set until I can figure out how to access the principal. There must be some way around the age 40 restriction. Keep looking into options. By the way, if Delia or her sister tries to contact you, don't respond. As far as anyone knows, you haven't heard from me in months. Carter, I read the email twice, each word landing like a physical blow. The casual dismissal of my intelligence and agency. The assumption that I blindly signed documents without understanding them. The calculated exploitation of my illness. There are dozens more, Aaron said quietly. Would you like to see them? I nodded, my jaw clenched, so tightly it ached. For the next hour, Aaron methodically walked me through Carter's digital trail. Emails to Connie discussing their escape plan dating back 9 months, well before my diagnosis. Communications with a Cayman Islands real estate agent about long-term property investments. Exchanges with a divorce attorney exploring options. for divorcing an incapacitated spouse with minimal financial obligation. Most damning was an email from the day of my surgery, from Carter Blackwood to Connie LaRue. Subject, done, it's handled. Account emptied. When Dr. Marshall called with an update, I made appropriate sympathetic noises, but between us, the prognosis isn't good. Complications during surgery. They're not optimistic about recovery. No reason we can't accelerate our timeline. I've booked us on tomorrow's flight. Pack for paradise, beautiful. This time next week, we'll be starting our new life with no more pretending and no more burdens. C. Delia, who had been reading over my shoulder, made a sound somewhere between a gasp and a growl. He told them you weren't expected to recover, while you were fighting for your life in surgery? The final pieces clicked into place. Carter hadn't just stolen our money. He'd created a narrative where I wasn't expected to survive, giving himself both an alibi for his absence and a justification for emptying the account. It wasn't just betrayal. It was calculated erasure of my existence. There's one more thing you should hear, Aaron said, producing a small digital recorder. I placed a recording device in their suite. This conversation took place last night. He pressed play, and Carter's voice filled the sunroom. Did you see the balance? The transfer should be hitting in 10 days. 85 grand, baby. We can start looking at that waterfront property you liked. Connie's voice, bright with excitement. Are you sure there won't be any issues with the money? What about Delia? Carter's laugh, dismissive and chillingly familiar. Delia? She's probably still drugged up in a hospital bed. Even if she's figured out what happened, what can she do? She's stuck in recovery for months, and by then, we'll have everything locked down here. Besides, she has no idea how the trust actually works. My grandfather set it up so I get paid no matter what. It's bulletproof. Connie again, slightly hesitant. But she's the trustee, right? That means something. It means she signs papers. Carter scoffed. It's a formality. The trust pays out quarterly, period. That's how these things work. Guaranteed income. Honestly, the joint account cash was just a bonus. The real money starts flowing once we establish residency here. Tax advantages, baby. We'll be living at a whole different level. Aaron stopped the recording. For several long moments, the only sound in the room was my controlled breathing as I processed this final confirmation of Carter's character, or lack thereof. Eva broke the silence. I've heard enough to confirm that Carter has violated every behavioral condition in the trust. His actions constitute fraud, potential medical, negligence, and certainly breach the ethical behavior and family values clauses. You have absolute legal standing to suspend his distributions. I closed my eyes, seeking centeredness amid the storm of emotions. When I opened them again, both Eva and Aaron seemed taken aback by what they saw. I don't want to suspend the distributions, I said, my voice calm and clear despite the fire burning within. Not yet. First, I want to modify them. I turned to Eva. You said I have the authority to redirect up to 30% of the trust's annual income to charitable organizations? She nodded, a slow smile of understanding spreading across her face. Good, I said, because I have some very specific charities in mind, and I'd like the donations to be made in Carter and Connie's names, with appropriate certifications sent to their current address. I looked back at the frozen image on Aaron's laptop. Carter and Connie, living their best life on stolen money and broken vows. 10 days, I said softly. 10 days until they learn what trustee really means. The next morning, I woke with a clarity and purpose that seemed to cut through the fog of pain medication. My body might be weakened, but my mind was razor sharp, focused on the intricate chess game that had begun without my knowledge, but would now continue with my full participation. When Delia brought my morning tea, she found me propped up in bed, surrounded by printouts of the Marshall Trust documents, a legal pad filled with notes in my precise handwriting. You should be resting, she admonished gently, setting the tea on my nightstand. "I've rested enough," I replied, not looking up from the section I was annotating. Carter and Connie have had months to plan while I was focused on my health. I need to catch up. Delia sat on the edge of the bed, concern etched on her face. "Dee, I'm worried about you. Yesterday was intense. All those emails, the recording. It's a lot to process while you're still healing." I finally looked up, meeting my sister's gaze. "I know you're worried, but honestly, having a purpose right now is helping me. It's giving me something to focus on besides the pain and betrayal. Just promise me you won't push yourself too hard," she said, squeezing my hand. "Revenge isn't worth compromising your recovery." "This isn't about revenge," I said quietly. "It's about justice and protection. Carter stole our emergency fund, money that was meant to cover my medical expenses, our mortgage, our future. I need to secure what's left." Delia nodded, unconvinced, but supportive. "So what's the plan?" Eva mentioned redirecting some of the trust money to charities. "That's just the beginning," I replied, handing her my legal pad. "I've been reviewing the trust provisions line by line. There's so much more I can do within the legal boundaries Abraham established." Before Delia could respond, her doorbell rang. Minutes later, Eva entered my temporary bedroom, looking impeccably professional in a charcoal suit despite it being Saturday. "You're working weekends now?" I asked, as she settled into the armchair beside the bed. "This case has become a priority," Eva replied simply. "Aaron sent a follow-up report this morning. Carter has contacted 3 separate financial advisors in Grand Cayman, apparently shopping for ways to potentially access the trust principal before he turns 40. "Can he do that?" Delia asked, alarmed. "No," Eva and I answered simultaneously. "The trust is ironclad on that point," Eva continued. "But his attempts demonstrate intent, which strengthens our position regarding his violation of the behavioral conditions." I nodded, then winced slightly as the movement pulled at my surgical site. "I've been making notes on those conditions. The trust specifications about financial responsibility and family values are deliberately broad, but there are specific provisions we can leverage." Eva leaned forward with interest as I outlined my findings. For the next hour, we refined my initial ideas into a comprehensive strategy, not merely reactive, but proactively protective of both the trust assets and my own financial future. "There's something else we need to discuss," Eva said when we had established the broad strokes of our approach. "Medical expenses. Your insurance will cover much of your surgery and hospital stay, but there will be significant out-of-pocket costs for your ongoing recovery, especially since Carter emptied your emergency fund." My stomach tightened at the reminder of the practical implications of Carter's betrayal. Beyond the emotional devastation lay very real financial concerns. "The trust has provisions for that as well," I said, flipping to another flagged section of the documents. Section 12 addresses medical emergencies for immediate family members of the beneficiary. As Carter's spouse, I qualify. Eva looked impressed. "You've been thorough." "I was a financial director before I was Carter's wife," I reminded her. "I know how to read contract language." We were interrupted by another arrival, Aaron Mercer, carrying his laptop and a slim folder. "Sorry to intrude on a weekend," he said, "but I thought you'd want to see this immediately." He handed me the folder, which contained printouts of a bank statement. It took me a moment to recognize it as our joint account, the one Carter had emptied. "Where did you get this?" I asked, scanning the document. "Mr. Blackwood accessed your online banking yesterday," Aaron explained. "He was checking to see if your insurance had deposited any reimbursements for your medical costs. Apparently, he's set up alerts for any new deposits." My hands tightened on the paper. "He's monitoring the account he emptied, waiting like a vulture for any new money to appear so he can take that too." "Precisely," Aaron confirmed. "And there's more. I've been monitoring his communications with the Cayman Bank. He's arranged for automatic transfers. Any deposit over $500 that lands in your joint account will be immediately swept to his Cayman account. A cold wave of anger washed through me, temporarily dulling even my physical pain. Carter wasn't just stealing our past savings. He was attempting to siphon any future funds as well. Can we stop him? Delia asked. Close the account? We could, Eva answered slowly. But I wonder if there might be a more strategic approach. I nodded, already following her thinking. If we close the account, he'll know I'm taking action. Right now, he believes I'm too ill or too uninformed to address what he's done. That misconception is our advantage. Exactly, Eva agreed. The element of surprise remains valuable. Aaron opened his laptop. There's one more thing you should see. Mr. Blackwood has been investigating you, Mrs. Blackwood. Investigating me? I echoed, confused. Aaron turned the screen to show me a series of emails between Carter and someone named Alex Torres, describing himself as a financial research specialist. Need comprehensive background on Delia Blackwood, née Lawrence. Particularly, interested in any financial holdings not disclosed during marriage. Willing to pay premium for expedited research. Discretion essential. I stared at the email, trying to process this new level of betrayal. He thinks I have hidden assets? After he's the one who stole our emergency fund? It appears he's searching for any resources you might have to pursue. Him legally, Aaron explained. He's specifically asked this Torres person to identify vulnerabilities in your financial history. Vulnerabilities, I repeated, a hollow laugh escaping me. My vulnerability was trusting my husband. Eva placed her hand over mine. This actually works in our favor. While Carter wastes time and money hunting for financial secrets that don't exist, we'll be implementing our real strategy. I looked at the three people gathered around my sickbed, my sister Delia, whose steady support never wavered, Eva, whose legal expertise was matched only by her evident outrage on my behalf, and Aaron, whose investigative skills were providing the intelligence we needed to act effectively. In my weakened state, I had found strength through this unlikely team. Carter believed I was alone, incapacitated, and powerless. He was wrong on all counts. We have 8 days until the quarterly distribution, I said, my voice gaining strength. Let's make every one of them count. Before I met Carter, I said. The following morning, as Delia helped me settle at her dining room table for our strategy meeting, I managed a $50 million portfolio for the Lawrence Foundation. Did you know that? Eva looked up from her legal pad. I knew you worked in finance, but I wasn't aware of the scope. Carter wasn't either. Not really, I continued, accepting the cushion Delia placed behind my back to ease the pressure on my incision site. He knew I was good with numbers, as he put it, but he never showed any interest in understanding what I actually did. Aaron arrived, nodding a greeting as he set up his laptop. That tracks with his psychology. From what I've gathered, he views financial expertise as valuable only when it serves his interests directly. Exactly, I agreed. When we met, I was transitioning from portfolio management to development director at the Children's Hospital. Foundation. Less pressure, more meaningful impact. At least, that's what I told myself. I paused, reflecting on choices made years ago. In reality, I was scaling back my career to accommodate our relationship. Carter's business ventures always seemed to require my support and attention. Delia made a disgusted sound. He systematically diminished you. No, I corrected gently. I diminished myself. That's an important distinction, and it stops now. I opened my laptop, not the personal one I'd used during my marriage, but my old professional machine I'd kept in storage. With a few keystrokes, I pulled up a secure cloud drive. For 15 years before meeting Carter, I specialized in complex financial structures, particularly trusts, endowments, and generational wealth management. I worked with families much like the Marshalls, helping them protect and grow their assets while navigating the emotional complexities that come with inherited wealth. I turned the screen to show them a comprehensive analysis of the Marshall Trust I'd created overnight, complete with flowcharts, decision trees, and projection models. This is... Eva trailed off, clearly impressed. This is who I was before. I became Mrs. Blackwood, I said simply. Carter saw me as a caretaker who happened to be a trustee. He never bothered to learn that I was once considered one of the top financial strategists for family trusts under $10 million. Aaron let out a low whistle as he scrolled through my analysis. This is professional-grade work. It is professional work, I corrected. Just because I stepped back from full-time financial management doesn't mean I lost the skills. For the next hour, I walked them through my comprehensive strategy. Not just for the immediate response to Carter's betrayal, but a long-term approach to managing the trust in accordance with Abraham's intentions while protecting my own interests. The trust generates approximately $340,000 in annual income, I explained, highlighting the relevant section of my analysis. Carter receives quarterly distributions totaling $340,000 annually, effectively the entire income. However, the trust provisions actually only guarantee him a minimum of 50% of annual income. The remaining 50% is distributed at the trustee's discretion. Eva's eyes widened slightly. And you've been approving full distribution all these years. Because we were married and his grandfather wanted to provide for him generously, I confirmed. But given the changed circumstances, I'm exercising my discretion differently. I clicked to the next page of my presentation. Phase 1, Immediate Response. We redirect 30% of the trust income, the maximum allowed for charitable donations under Section 9, to 3 organizations: the National Center for Financial Abuse Prevention, the Surgical Recovery Support Network, and the Marshall Family Medical Research Fund, which Abraham established before his death. All perfectly aligned with the trust's stated values, Eva noted with approval. Phase 2, I continued, involves reducing Carter's quarterly distribution to the minimum 50%, guaranteed by the trust, with the remaining 20% held in reserve. For what purpose? Aaron asked. The trust allows for accumulation of undistributed income for major expenses that advance the beneficiary's long-term financial stability, traditionally things like education, home purchases, or business investments. I explained. I'm establishing a separate account for these funds with specific release conditions. And Phase 3? Delia prompted. I took a deep breath. Phase 3 involves my own financial protection. Under Section 15, Paragraph 7, the trustee is entitled to reasonable compensation for services rendered. For 7 years, I've waived that compensation. No longer. The standard trustee fee for a trust of this size is 1.2% of assets annually, approximately $50,000 per year, Eva noted. Precisely, I confirmed. Retroactive for 7 years. Aaron looked impressed. That's $350,000. $347,862 to be exact, I corrected. Almost exactly the amount Carter stole from our joint account, plus estimated interest. He never read the fine print, Delia said, a note of wonder in her voice. All these years you could have been paid for managing his trust. I didn't need the money then, I said quietly. We were partners, or so I thought. But Carter has changed the rules of our relationship. Now I'm simply exercising the rights I've always had but chose not to use. I closed my laptop, feeling a strange mixture of sadness and resolve. Carter dismissed me as just signing papers. He's about to discover exactly what those papers mean in the hands of someone who actually understands them. Over the next 3 days, my strength gradually improved, allowing me to work for longer, stretches before fatigue overtook me. My temporary office in Delia's sunroom became command central, with documents, laptops, and legal references spread across the table. Eva had brought in a junior associate, a sharp young attorney named Mia, to help process the mounting paperwork. Aaron maintained his surveillance in Grand Cayman, providing daily updates on Carter and Connie's activities, primarily a nauseating parade of beach lounging, champagne brunches, and jewelry shopping. "They've put a deposit on a waterfront condo," Aaron reported during our morning conference call. $5 million with financing contingent on proof of ongoing income. "They've submitted the Marshall Trust documentation as verification." I raised an eyebrow. "Did they provide the complete trust documents?" "No," Aaron replied. "Just the distribution schedule showing the quarterly payments. Carefully edited too. Remove any mention of trustee discretion or behavioral conditions." "Fraud by omission," Eva noted, making a notation in her ever-present legal pad. "Add it to the file," I directed Mia, who was compiling a comprehensive record of Carter's actions. "Do we have the bank records from before our joint account was emptied?" Mia nodded, passing me a thick folder. 6 months of complete statements. As requested, I've highlighted all transactions over $1,000. I began methodically reviewing the statements, looking for patterns that might have escaped my notice when I trusted my husband implicitly. It didn't take long to find them. "Look at this," I said, spreading several statements across the table. "Regular withdrawals of $3,000 to $5,000 in cash, always on Tuesdays when I had my weekly foundation meeting." I flipped to another section. "And these transfers to an account? At First Republic, $2,500 every 2 weeks, starting 9 months ago." Eva examined the statements. "Do we know whose account that is?" "Connie LaRue," I confirmed grimly. "I called the Foundation's HR department yesterday. Connie resigned exactly 9 months ago, the same week these transfers began, cited personal reasons for her departure." "He was paying her," Delia said, the disgust evident in her voice, "while you were going through medical tests and preparing for surgery. He was funneling your joint money to his mistress." I continued parsing the statements, separating transactions into categories: legitimate household expenses, Carter's personal spending, unexplained cash withdrawals, and direct transfers to Connie or unknown accounts. By lunchtime, I had reconstructed a damning financial timeline. For at least 9 months, possibly longer, Carter had been systematically diverting funds from our joint account. The pattern accelerated after my diagnosis, with larger withdrawals and transfers coinciding with each stage of my illness. "The timing is telling," Eva observed, reviewing my analysis. "The weekend after your first round of tests, he withdrew $7,000 in cash. The day after your diagnosis was confirmed, he transferred $12,000 to the Cayman account." "He was hedging his bets," I said quietly. "If I recovered quickly, he could continue the slow siphoning. When the surgery became necessary, he accelerated his timeline." Aaron's afternoon update brought additional evidence. Carter had been making inquiries about divorce attorneys in Grand Cayman, specifically those who specialized in international asset protection. "He's planning for you to pursue him legally," Aaron explained, "but he believes the combination of offshore banking and his residency status will protect him." "He's not entirely wrong," Eva admitted. "International financial cases are notoriously difficult to pursue, especially in jurisdictions like the Caymans. That's why your position as trustee is so crucial. It's your leverage point that bypasses those protections." As the day progressed, I compiled a second set of documents, a complete account of my own financial contributions to our marriage. My salary from the foundation, which had covered most of our daily expenses. The inheritance from my parents, that had provided the down payment for our home. The countless hours of unpaid labor managing our household while Carter pursued his frequently changing entrepreneurial visions. "What are you doing?" Delia asked, bringing me tea as the afternoon light began to fade. "Building a complete picture," I replied, not looking up from my calculations. "Not just of what Carter took, but of what I contributed. I need to understand the full scope before I can respond appropriately." The numbers told a story Carter had never acknowledged, that despite his trust fund and family name, I had been the primary financial stabilizer in our marriage. My consistent income had covered our health insurance, property taxes, and most daily expenses, while his quarterly distributions funded our luxuries and his business ventures. You know what's ironic, I said as I finalized my analysis. If Carter had simply asked for a divorce, he would have remained in full control of his trust. I would have signed off on the distributions without question, as I always have. But he wanted everything, Delia observed. The trust, your joint savings, and freedom from any financial obligation to you. Precisely, I agreed. And in attempting to take everything, he's jeopardized the one thing that was genuinely secure, his trust income. By evening, I had completed my comprehensive financial reconstruction. The picture it painted was clear and devastating. Carter had been methodically extracting himself financially from our marriage for nearly a year, while creating the illusion of supporting me through my health crisis. I closed the final folder, a cold resolve settling in my chest. We have everything we need now. For the trust modifications? Eva asked. For that, I confirmed, and for whatever comes next. Carter thought he was the only one making strategic financial moves. He was wrong. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor to Delia's house. Dr. Athena Marshall arrived shortly after 9, medical bag in hand, her professional demeanor as crisp as her white coat. Your post-surgical follow-up, she explained as Delia showed her into the sunroom where I had established my workspace. Since you missed your scheduled appointment yesterday. I winced, both from the movement of sitting up straighter and from the realization I'd completely forgotten the appointment amid my financial investigations. I'm sorry, Dr. Marshall. Time has become fluid lately. She nodded understandingly as she took my vitals. Considering the circumstances, that's hardly surprising. Your sister explained some of what's happening when she called to reschedule. I shot Delia a questioning look. Only the basics, Delia defended. That Carter left during your surgery and took money. Dr. Marshall should know about your stress levels. It affects your recovery. Dr. Marshall's expression remained professionally neutral as she examined my surgical site. The incision is healing well, but your blood pressure is elevated. That's concerning at this stage. Unavoidable, I'm afraid, I replied. There are matters I need to address. Dr. Marshall sat down across from me, setting aside her stethoscope. Mrs. Blackwood, Delia. Doctor-patient confidentiality allows me to speak frankly. Stress impedes healing. Whatever you're dealing with, your recovery needs to remain the priority. I gestured toward the organized chaos of documents surrounding me. This is part of my recovery, Dr. Marshall. Taking control of what I can while my body heals at its own pace. She studied me for a moment. Then something in her expression shifted slightly. You know, I wasn't going to mention this, but given the circumstances, I was acquainted with Abraham Marshall. He was a significant donor to our hospital's oncology research program. This caught me by surprise. You knew Carter's grandfather? She nodded. For several years before his passing. He was a remarkably astute man with strong principles. When he learned of my interest in advancing surgical techniques for complex abdominal tumors like yours, he established a research fund specifically for that purpose. A chill ran through me as connections formed. The Marshall Family Medical Research Fund. Exactly, Dr. Marshall confirmed. Abraham expressed particular satisfaction that his fund might someday benefit his grandson's wife, should the need arise. She paused significantly. The fund that still operates under trustee supervision. Understanding dawned. You're saying the research that helped develop my surgical procedure was partially funded by the very trust I now manage? Circles within. Circles, Dr. Marshall said with a slight smile. Abraham believed in what he called purposeful wealth, money directed toward meaningful impact. He spoke quite highly of you as the future steward of the Marshall legacy. After Dr. Marshall, Left, having extracted a promise that I would prioritize rest alongside my financial campaign, Delia looked at me curiously. "That was an interesting coincidence," she remarked. "I'm beginning to think there are no coincidences where Abraham Marshall was concerned," I replied thoughtfully. "The more I learn about him, the more I suspect he orchestrated safeguards I'm only now discovering." Later that afternoon, Eva arrived with another addition to our growing team. A distinguished older gentleman she introduced as Gregory Phelps, forensic accountant. "Mr. Phelps has extensive experience with trust enforcement and financial malfeasance," Eva explained as he arranged his leather portfolio on the table. "I thought his expertise might be valuable for what we're trying to accomplish." Gregory's deep voice carried the weight of decades in financial investigation. "Mrs. Blackwood, I've reviewed the preliminary documents Ms. Hernandez shared. Your husband's actions follow a pattern I've seen numerous times. Systematic financial extraction ahead of abandonment." "Is it really that common?" I asked, disheartened by the thought. "Unfortunately, yes," he confirmed. "Particularly when there's illness involved. Medical vulnerability creates a perfect cover for financial predation. The victim is focused on survival, not bank statements." For the next 2 hours, Gregory reviewed my financial reconstructions, occasionally nodding with approval at my methodology. His experienced eye caught several patterns I'd missed. Small transfers disguised as bill payments that actually went to a separate account. Cash withdrawals timed with Carter's supposed business trips. "He was building his escape fund for longer than 9 months, Gregory concluded, showing me a spreadsheet he'd constructed. "Based on these patterns, I'd estimate the planning began approximately 14 months ago. Shortly after your annual physical showed the first anomalies that eventually led to your diagnosis." I sat back, absorbing this revelation. 14 months. Before I even knew I was ill, before the tumor was identified. When I was still experiencing only vague symptoms, easily attributed to stress or age. "How could he have known?" I whispered, more to myself than the others. Gregory's expression was sympathetic, but firm. "He may not have known specifically about your health, but something triggered his decision to begin extracting himself financially. In my experience, these actions often coincide with the beginning of an extramarital relationship." The implication was clear. Carter's relationship with Connie likely predated my illness entirely. My diagnosis hadn't caused his betrayal. It had merely accelerated a plan already in motion. Aaron's afternoon update seemed to confirm this theory. His contact at the Royal Palms Resort had accessed records showing Carter and Connie had stayed there together twice in the previous year, once coinciding with Carter's technology conference in Miami, and again during his business development retreat 6 months later. "He's been living a double life for at least a year," Aaron concluded, "using your joint funds to finance romantic getaways with Ms. LaRue." As this new information settled over me, I felt a strange sense of clarity, rather than additional hurt. The betrayal was deeper than I'd imagined, but in a way, that made my path forward clearer. This wasn't a momentary moral failing or a panic response to my illness. It was a calculated, long-term deception. 5 days until the quarterly distribution, I said, my voice steady. "I think it's time to bring in one more resource. Who did you have in mind?" Eva asked. I pulled up an email on my laptop and turned the screen for her to see. "Someone who understands the Marshall family dynamics better than anyone else alive. Abraham's sister, Carter's great-aunt Vivian." Vivian Marshall Bradford arrived the following morning like a force of nature. At 84, she retained the commanding presence that had made her a formidable business leader in her own right, separate from the Marshall family enterprises. Her silver hair was styled in an elegant bob, her posture perfect despite her age, and her eyes, the same startling blue as Carter's, missed nothing as Delia showed her into the sunroom. "So this is where the resistance is being mounted," she declared, surveying our operation with evident approval. "Good to see the Marshall strategizing gene didn't die with my brother." Thank you for coming on such short notice, Mrs. Bradford, I said, attempting to rise from my chair before she waved me back down. Vivian, please, and don't disturb your healing for formality's sake, she insisted, settling into the chair opposite me. I've been waiting for your call ever since I heard about Carter's latest escapade. You already knew? I asked, surprised. Vivian snorted delicately. The Cayman Islands banking community is smaller than you might think, especially for those of us who've been navigating it for decades. Word travels when a marshal starts making inquiries about circumventing trust restrictions. She fixed me with a penetrating gaze. What I don't know is why you waited so long to contact me. I needed to understand the full scope of the situation first, I admitted. And frankly, I wasn't sure where your loyalties would lie. Vivian's laugh was sharp and surprisingly youthful. Family loyalty is about upholding values, not blindly supporting reprehensible behavior. Abraham and I were aligned on that point, if few others. She reached into her handbag, extracting a slim file folder. Now, I believe these might be useful to your cause. The folder contained photographs and documents dating back decades. Carter as a child with his parents and grandfather, family, celebration photos, and most significantly, trust documents predating the current version I was administering. The Marshall Family Trust has existed in various forms for 3 generations, Vivian explained, pointing to amendments and revisions spanning 50 years. What's interesting is how Abraham modified it after Carter's parents died. Each revision added more stringent behavioral conditions and greater trustee powers. I leafed through the documents, noting the progression. He was responding to patterns he observed in Carter's behavior? Precisely, Vivian confirmed. My brother was no fool. He watched Carter grow increasingly entitled and financially irresponsible through his 20s. By the time you entered the picture, Abraham was genuinely concerned about Carter's capacity to manage wealth responsibly. But he still left him the trust, I pointed out. With you as trustee, Vivian countered. That was no accident, my dear. Abraham interviewed 3 of Carter's serious girlfriends before you. None were appointed trustee. This revelation stunned me into momentary silence. Abraham had interviewed me? Those casual lunches and seemingly friendly conversations about my career and values had been assessments? Don't look so shocked, Vivian said, correctly interpreting my expression. Abraham had no children of his own. The Marshall fortune was his life's work. He wasn't about to entrust its stewardship to someone he hadn't vetted thoroughly. Did Carter know about this vetting process? Vivian's expression turned wry. What do you think? I think Carter believed his grandfather accepted me because he loved me, I said slowly. Not because Abraham saw me as a financial safeguard against Carter's impulses. And therein lies the fundamental miscalculation Carter has made his entire life, Vivian replied. He assumes things are given to him because he deserves them, not because others have worked to provide them. It's why he's never read the trust provisions. In his mind, the money is simply his by birthright. Eva, who had been quietly observing our exchange, leaned forward. Mrs. Bradford, Vivian, your insights into the family dynamics are invaluable. But I'm curious why you've chosen to become involved now. Vivian's expression hardened slightly. Because what Carter has done violates everything the Marshall name stands for. Using a spouse's illness as cover for financial extraction, abandoning family responsibilities. My brother would be appalled. She turned back to me. Besides, I've waited 7 years to see if you would rise to the occasion Abraham believed you capable of. It appears that time has come. As our conversation continued, Vivian revealed layers of Marshall family history I'd never known. Previous financial improprieties by Carter's father that had prompted the initial trust restrictions. Carter's adolescent spending sprees that had necessitated his first financial intervention. The family's quiet management of Carter's failed business ventures before I entered the picture. He presents himself as a self-made entrepreneur, Vivian explained. But every business he's started has been bankrolled by family money and quietly dissolved when it inevitably failed. The image of success without the substance, that's Carter's specialty. By midday, a more complete picture had emerged, not just of Carter's betrayal of me, but of his lifelong pattern of entitlement, financial irresponsibility, and carefully maintained illusions. "There's one more thing you should know," Vivian said as she prepared to leave. "Carter isn't the first marshal to attempt accessing trust funds through deception. His father tried similar maneuvers. Abraham anticipated that Carter might eventually follow suit." She handed me a sealed envelope, yellowed slightly with age. "Abraham gave me this shortly before his death, with instructions to deliver it to you if Carter ever attempted to circumvent the trust conditions." The envelope bore my name in Abraham's distinctive handwriting, along with a date, 6 years ago, shortly before he passed away. "He prepared this specifically for this scenario?" I asked, turning the envelope in my hands. "My brother," Vivian said with a small, sad smile, "always planned for contingencies, especially the ones he hoped would never materialize." As Delia showed Vivian out, I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, not a letter this time, but a document titled Trustee Emergency Powers Activation Protocol. My hands trembled slightly as I began to read, understanding, dawning. Abraham hadn't just given me the power to reduce Carter's distributions or redirect portions to charity. Under specific conditions of egregious violation, conditions Carter had unquestionably met, I had the authority to do much more. Document Abraham had left with Vivian transformed our strategy completely. For the remainder of the day, Eva, Gregory, and I pored over the Emergency Powers Activation Protocol, analyzing its implications and verifying its legal validity. "It's extraordinary," Eva said, carefully reviewing the notarized document for the third time. "But it's legitimately executed and consistent with trust law. Abraham essentially created a failsafe within the trust structure. The protocol outlined a set of specific conditions under which the trustee could activate enhanced powers over the trust assets. 3 conditions needed to be met: documented financial malfeasance by the beneficiary, actions contrary to explicitly stated Marshall family values, and attempts to circumvent trust provisions. Carter had achieved this trifecta with remarkable efficiency. Once activated, the protocol granted me temporary but extensive control, including the ability to suspend all distributions for up to 1 year, require financial counseling as a condition of reinstating payments, and most significantly, establish a secondary oversight committee to review all future distribution requests. Abraham created this specifically to address the scenario we're facing, I said, still processing the implications. He anticipated that Carter might someday attempt to access funds improperly or abandon his responsibilities. "The question is," Gregory interjected, "how do we leverage these powers most effectively? Simply cutting off Carter's funds might feel satisfying, but it could drive him to more desperate measures." I leaned back in my chair, wincing slightly as my healing incision protested the movement. "We need to be strategic, not punitive. The goal isn't to hurt Carter, but to protect the trust assets and establish appropriate accountability." As evening approached, Aaron's daily update provided the final piece we needed. Carter had submitted formal documentation to the Cayman property. Developers, using the upcoming trust distribution as proof of income for financing his new beachfront property. The closing was scheduled for 3 days after the distribution date, with a non-refundable deposit of $100,000 already paid from the funds he'd taken from our joint account. He's financially committed himself to a timeline dependent on receiving that distribution, Aaron explained. If the money doesn't arrive as expected, he'll lose the deposit and potentially face penalties for breach of contract. Which creates our perfect window of opportunity, I said, clarity crystallizing into certainty. We activate the emergency protocol the day before the scheduled distribution. Eva looked concerned. That's cutting it extremely close. The banking protocols for trust distributions typically initiate 48 hours in advance. Exactly, I agreed. We'll let those protocols begin. Let Carter see the pending transaction in his account. Then we activate the emergency powers and redirect the funds according to our new framework. The psychological impact would be significant, Gregory noted. Seeing the expected funds and then having them removed at the last moment. It's not about psychological impact, I corrected. It's about creating a moment of financial vulnerability that will necessitate communication. Right now, Carter believes he can simply ignore me while living off the trust income. We need to change that equation. Over dinner, Delia expressed concerns about my approach. This feels like it's becoming about revenge, Dee. I'm worried about what that might do to your recovery. I put down my fork, considering her words carefully. It's not revenge, though I understand why it might appear that way. It's about establishing consequences and creating leverage. Carter needs to understand that financial abandonment has repercussions. But completely cutting off his funds? Delia pressed. Isn't that extreme? It's temporary, I explained. And necessary to bring him to the negotiation table. Right now, he has no incentive to address what he's done or take responsibility for his actions. This changes the power dynamic. Later that evening, as I reviewed the final details of our plan, Ava raised another important consideration. Have you thought about what this means for your marriage legally? She asked gently. These actions, while justified for trust management, effectively acknowledge the marriage is over. I nodded, having already confronted this reality. I've known that since I saw the bank account emptied. What Carter did wasn't just financial betrayal. It was abandonment during my greatest vulnerability. There's no coming back from that. Then we should discuss divorce strategy as part of this plan, Eva suggested. Your position as trustee is separate from your marital status, but the timing of divorce proceedings could affect other financial considerations. Let's hold on divorce filing for now, I decided after careful thought. First, we need to establish the new trust parameters. Once Carter understands his financial future is contingent on proper resolution of our marital assets, we'll have more productive negotiations. By midnight, our strategic framework was complete. I would activate the emergency protocol 24 hours before the scheduled distribution. The pending transaction would appear in Carter's account, then be replaced by a formal notification of distribution suspension under the emergency powers provision. Simultaneously, formal communications would be sent to Carter outlining the conditions required for reinstatement of distributions, beginning with full accounting for the misappropriated joint funds. 3 days, I said as our team dispersed for the night. In 3 days, Carter learns that his financial future isn't as secure as he believed. As Delia helped me prepare for bed, she asked quietly, "Are you sure you're ready for his reaction? When he realizes what you've done, he won't take it quietly." I settled against the pillows, feeling strangely calm despite the confrontation looming on the horizon. For 7 years, I've lived with a man who believed I was financially naive. It's time he discovered just how wrong he's been. For the first time since waking from surgery to discover Carter's betrayal, I slept deeply and dreamlessly, the sleep of someone who had found their path forward. The day before the scheduled distribution dawned clear and bright, a stark contrast to the storm we were about to unleash. I awoke earlier than usual, a sense of purpose cutting through the lingering surgical pain and fatigue. "Today's the day," Delia said, bringing me tea and medication. "How are you feeling?" "Ready," I replied simply. After 11 days of investigation, planning, and preparation, the moment had arrived to transform knowledge into action. Eva arrived at 8 a.m. sharp, accompanied by a notary public. The emergency powers activation protocol required formal documentation to implement, including notarized attestations regarding the conditions that necessitated its use. Once we file these documents with the trust administrator, there's no turning back Eva cautioned as I reviewed the final paperwork. Are you absolutely certain you want to proceed? I met her gaze steadily. Carter made his choice when he emptied our account during my surgery. I'm simply responding to the situation he created. With a sense of solemn purpose, I signed the multiple documents required to activate Abraham's fail-safe provisions. Each signature felt like both an ending and a beginning. The end of my passive acceptance of Carter's entitlement. The beginning of a new chapter where I fully embraced the responsibility Abraham had entrusted to me. At precisely 9:30 a.m., Eva submitted the executed documents to the trust administrator electronically, while simultaneously sending formal notification to Carter via certified email, regular email, and express courier to his Cayman Islands address. Delivery confirmed. Aaron reported at 9:45 a.m. The email has been received on Mr. Blackwood's device, though not yet opened. Now we waited. The trust distribution had been scheduled for electronic deposit at 10 a.m. the following day. According to normal banking procedures, a pending transaction notification would appear in Carter's account within hours, showing the expected $85,000 quarterly payment in process. By noon, Gregory confirmed the trust administrator had processed our documents and implemented the emergency protocol. The distribution has been officially suspended, he reported. The pending transaction notice will be replaced with a suspension notification by end of day. At 2:17 p.m., Aaron's monitoring system alerted us that Carter had checked his bank account. He's seeing the pending deposit notification, Aaron confirmed. Based on his subsequent actions, he's already contacting the property developers to confirm the closing schedule. He thinks the money is coming, Delia murmured, a mixture of satisfaction and apprehension in her voice. For about 6 more hours, I replied. Then reality arrives. At 4:30 p.m., Ava received confirmation from the trust administrator that the I-by formal suspension notice was being processed into the banking system. By 8 p.m., it would replace the pending transaction notification in Carter's account. We should establish a monitoring rotation for tonight, Aaron suggested. Mr. Blackwood's reaction when he discovers the suspension will be immediate and likely volatile. I nodded in agreement. I'd like to be notified regardless of the hour. This is my responsibility to see through. As evening approached, a strange calm settled over me. For days, I had focused entirely on the mechanics of activating the emergency protocol, on building the case and executing the strategy. Now, with everything in motion, I found myself reflecting on the deeper implications of what was happening. Carter was about to discover that actions have consequences, perhaps for the first time in his privileged life. The call came at 3:18 a.m. I was already half awake, anticipation making true sleep impossible. Aaron's voice was crisp despite the hour. He's just checked his account and found the suspension notice. His reaction is significant. I reached for the tablet on my nightstand where Aaron had set up a secure monitoring dashboard. Carter's electronic activities were displayed in real time, frantically refreshing his bank account, attempting to call the trust administrator, closed until morning, and finally composing a series of increasingly agitated emails. The first went to his financial advisor, emergency. Trust payment blocked. Need immediate assistance. This must be a mistake. Closing on property in 2 days. Call me ASAP regardless of hour. The second, sent minutes later, went to a Cayman Islands attorney. Distribution from Marshall Trust suspended without warning. Need to know my legal options for forcing immediate release of funds. Critical financial commitments pending. The third email, sent at 3:27 a.m., went to an unfamiliar address with the subject line, "Need loan immediately." Delia appeared in my doorway, tying her robe. "Is it happening?" I nodded, showing her the dashboard. He's panicking, exactly as expected. At 3:42 a.m., Carter's phone records showed him making a call to the property developer, despite the hour. The call lasted less than a minute, likely voicemail. By 4:15 a.m., Carter had made 17 attempts to contact various financial institutions, advisors, and attorneys. The pattern showed escalating desperation as he encountered the implacable reality of business hours and unavailable assistance in the middle of the night. At 4:23 a.m., Carter finally opened the formal notification email from the trust administrator. The system showed him downloading the attached documents, the Emergency Powers Activation Protocol, and my detailed accounting of his violations of trust conditions. For 11 minutes, there was no digital activity. I imagined him reading through the documents, the gradual dawning of understanding that this was no banking error or temporary glitch. Then, at 4:34 a.m., his first direct response, an email to my personal account. "What the hell do you think you're doing? You can't block my trust payments. That money is mine. Fix this immediately or you'll regret it." The threat, though vague, was unmistakable. I showed the email to Aaron, who had joined us via video call. "Classic first response," Aaron commented. "Denial of reality, assertion of entitlement, followed by intimidation. I'd expect escalation within the hour." He was right. At 5:07 a.m., a second email arrived. "Delia, I don't know what lies you've been told or what you think you know, but this is a serious mistake. The trust doesn't work this way. Grandfather set it up to provide my income. You're just the paper pusher. Call off whatever this is, or I'll be forced to take legal action against you." The dismissive characterization, "just the paper pusher," nearly made me laugh despite the tension. Even now, facing direct evidence of my authority, Carter clung to his illusion of my financial naivety. By 6 a.m., Carter had progressed to calling my phone repeatedly. I let each call go to voicemail, following our agreed strategy of controlled, documented communication only. He's trapped on an island with no access to his expected funds, a major financial commitment pending, and the sudden realization that the money he's counted on his entire adult life isn't guaranteed, Eva observed when she arrived at 7:30 a.m. Psychologically speaking, he's experiencing a perfect storm. The question is, Delia said, what will he do next? We didn't have to wait long for the answer. By mid-morning, Carter's digital frenzy had evolved into a more coordinated response. He had retained a Cayman Islands attorney specializing in trust disputes, who sent a formal letter demanding immediate reinstatement of distributions and threatening legal action for improper exercise of trustee powers. Eva reviewed the letter, with professional detachment. Boilerplate intimidation. He hasn't actually read the trust documents or the emergency protocol. If he had, he'd know these threats are groundless. As we prepared our formal response, Aaron reported that Carter and Connie were making hasty arrangements to return to the United States. They've booked flights for tomorrow morning. Their property closing has been postponed pending resolution of a temporary financial matter. He's coming back to confront you in person, Delia said, concern evident in her voice. Good, I replied calmly. Face-to-face negotiation is more efficient than long-distance legal posturing. At noon, following our predetermined timeline, I authorized Ava to send our comprehensive response package to Carter, his attorney, and the trust administrator. The package included a detailed accounting of Carter's financial malfeasance, including bank records of his systematic withdrawal of joint funds during my illness, documentation of his attempts to circumvent trust provisions through Cayman Islands, financial vehicles, Nurse Connie's sworn statement regarding Carter's comments while I was unconscious, a formal notice of conditions required for reinstatement of trust distributions. These conditions were clear and non-negotiable. Full repayment of the $249,972.17, taken from our joint account submission to a complete financial audit by an independent trustee. Participation in financial responsibility counseling as mandated by the trust provisions, formal acknowledgement of trust, violations and written commitment to adhere to conditions. He'll fight this, Gregory predicted as we finalized the documents. His entire self-image is built on financial entitlement. Let him fight, I said. Every legal challenge will only strengthen our position and deplete whatever resources he has remaining. By late afternoon, Carter's attorney requested an emergency video conference. Ava handled the call, maintaining our strategy of keeping me one step removed from direct confrontation until Carter met our initial conditions. Their position is deteriorating rapidly, Ava reported afterward. The property developers are demanding evidence of financial solvency within 48 hours, or they'll retain the deposit and seek penalties. His attorney actually asked if we would consider releasing just enough funds to cover the property transaction. And your response? I asked. That full repayment of the joint account funds must precede any discussion of partial trust distributions. Eva replied with professional satisfaction. I also mentioned that as trustee, you've implemented the retroactive compensation clause for the past 7 years of services. By evening, Carter's desperation had reached new heights. He sent a direct email that oscillated between threats and attempts at emotional manipulation. Delia, you're making a terrible mistake. This property is a critical investment opportunity. I left because I couldn't handle watching you suffer. The money was for both our futures. If you ruin this deal, you're destroying everything we could have built. Your illness has clearly affected your judgment. When I return tomorrow, we need to talk rationally about this vindictive behavior. I read the email twice, noting the revealing contradictions. He claimed to have left because he couldn't handle my suffering, yet took our emergency fund meant to support my recovery. He insisted the money was for both our futures, while establishing himself in a tax haven with another. Woman, what's your response? Delia asked, reading over my shoulder. Nothing yet, I replied. His words tell me everything I need to know about his mindset. He still believes he can manipulate me. Tomorrow, when he arrives, he'll discover just how much has changed. The pieces were in place. The formal mechanisms were engaged. Now we awaited Carter's physical return and the confrontation that would determine the shape of our futures. Carter's flight was scheduled to land at 4:15 p.m. the following day. By unspoken agreement, our team gathered at Delia's house by early afternoon, preparing for the confrontation to come. I insisted on dressing formally despite my still healing incision, charcoal slacks, a silk blouse, and the pearl earrings Abraham had given me on my wedding day. No longer confined to loungewear, I reclaimed another piece of my pre-surgery identity. Eva had prepared the sunroom as an impromptu conference space, with formal seating arranged to provide me both authority and protection. Gregory organized our documentation into clear, irrefutable exhibits. Aaron established discrete recording devices to document the meeting, legal in our state with single-party consent. Are you certain you want to confront him directly? Delia asked as she helped me apply light makeup. Eva could handle the initial meeting. I met my reflection's gaze in the mirror. The woman looking back appeared thinner, perhaps, but her eyes held a clarity and resolve I hadn't seen in years. I need to do this myself, I replied. Not just for the practical outcome, but for my own healing. I spent too many years diminishing myself to accommodate Carter's ego. That ends today. At 4:32 p.m., Aaron's monitoring system alerted us that Carter's flight had landed. By 5:17 p.m., his rented car was turning onto Delia's street. I took my position in the sunroom, Eva flanking me on one side, Gregory on the other, with relevant documents arranged precisely on the table before me. When the doorbell rang, I nodded to Delia. Show him in. Carter strode into the sunroom with the confident air of someone who expected to quickly resolve an unfortunate misunderstanding. He wore linen pants and a casual designer shirt. Beach casual, inappropriate for the serious financial discussion ahead. The dissonance was telling. His confident expression faltered momentarily when he saw the formal arrangement of the room and the assembled team. He had clearly expected to find me alone, weakened by surgery and emotionally vulnerable. Delia, he began, his tone a practiced blend of concern and authority. "This has gotten completely out of hand. I came straight from the airport to sort this out." He glanced pointedly at the others. "Privately." "That won't be necessary," I replied, my voice cool and professional. "Everyone here is familiar with our situation and has a relevant role in today's discussion." Carter's facade cracked slightly. "Look, I understand you're upset about the account. I can explain everything if you'll just listen reasonably." "I'm listening," I said, gesturing to the chair positioned across from me. "Please, explain why you emptied our joint account while I was in surgery. Explain why you told your mistress I wouldn't need money where I was going. Explain why you've been systematically funneling our joint funds to offshore accounts for months while I was focused on my health crisis." Color drained from Carter's face as he realized I knew far more than he had anticipated. His eyes darted to the meticulously organized documents on the table. "You've been spying on me?" he demanded, shifting immediately to indignation. "I've been investigating financial malfeasance," I corrected calmly. "As both your spouse and the trustee of the Marshall Trust, I have not only the right but the obligation to understand exactly what's happened." "The trust is my inheritance," Carter snapped, his sense of entitlement surfacing. "You're just the administrator." I smiled slightly, sliding Abraham's emergency powers document across the table. "Perhaps you should read the actual provisions before making assertions about how the trust works." As Carter scanned the document, his expression transformed from confidence to shock to something approaching fear. For perhaps the first time in his adult life, he was confronting financial consequences he couldn't charm or manipulate his way around. "This can't be legal," he muttered, looking up with narrowed eyes. "I assure you it is," Eva interjected smoothly. "Verified by multiple trust attorneys, your grandfather was quite thorough." Carter's calculated facade crumbled entirely, revealing the frightened, entitled man beneath. "What do you want from me?" he demanded. "Accountability," I answered simply, "beginning with the return of the funds you took while I was fighting for my life." The confrontation with Carter lasted 3 hours and 17 minutes. It progressed through predictable stages: denial, anger, attempted manipulation, desperate bargaining, and finally, grudging acceptance. By 8:45 p.m., he had signed a comprehensive agreement that Eva had prepared in advance, with only minor modifications. The terms were straightforward. Carter would repay the full amount taken from our joint account within 7 days. In exchange, I would authorize a one-time emergency distribution of $35,000 from the trust, enough to cover his immediate expenses, but not the Cayman property deposit. All future distributions would require adherence to a structured financial responsibility plan, including quarterly reviews with the newly established Oversight Committee. After Carter left, shell-shocked and diminished, our small team shared a quiet moment of triumph. He actually believed he could walk in here and charm his way back into control, Delia marveled, pouring celebratory tea since wine remained off limits during my recovery. "Men like Carter rarely face real consequences," Gregory observed. "Their confidence comes from lifetime experience of managing to talk their way out of accountability." "Until they encounter someone who sees through the facade," Eva added, raising her teacup in my direction. The satisfaction was real, but tempered with a certain melancholy. 7 years of marriage had ended not with dramatic declarations, but with signatures on legal documents and clinical discussions of financial settlements. It was necessary, appropriate, and still somehow sad. Later that night, unable to sleep despite physical exhaustion, I sat in Delia's garden beneath a clear sky scattered with stars. The cool night air carried the scent of jasmine from the flowering vines along the fence, simple pleasures I might have missed during my previous life of dinner parties and charity galas with Carter. Delia found me there, draping a light blanket over my shoulders before settling into the adjacent chair. "Penny for your thoughts," she said softly. "I'm thinking about Abraham," I replied after a moment. about how clearly he saw what I couldn't or wouldn't see about Carter, and about how he created this elaborate safety net for me years before I needed it. He was an extraordinary man, Delia agreed. The irony is that if Carter had simply asked for a divorce, if he'd been honest about wanting to leave, about Connie, I would have given him everything he wanted. I would have signed off on his quarterly distributions without question. I would have made it easy for him. But Carter doesn't do honesty, Delia pointed out. His entire life is built on appearance over substance. And now? Now he faces the consequence of that choice. Limited access to his trust, financial oversight, and the beginning of divorce proceedings where his actions will be fully documented. We sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, the distant sound of night insects providing gentle background to our thoughts. "What about you?" Delia finally asked. "What comes next for Delia Blackwood?" It was a profound question that had been forming in the back of my mind throughout the ordeal. Who was I, separate from my identity as Carter's wife? What did I want for my future now that the life I'd planned had disintegrated? "First, I complete my physical recovery," I said, my hand unconsciously touching my healing incision. "Then I think I'll contact the Children's Hospital Foundation about returning to work. Not as development director this time, but perhaps in financial oversight." "Using your skills more directly again?" Delia nodded approvingly. "Abraham saw something in me that I'd allowed to become dormant during my marriage," I continued. "A capacity for financial stewardship and ethical oversight. I think it's time I fully embrace that part of myself again." As we sat beneath the stars, I felt a sense of possibility opening before me. Not despite the betrayal and loss, but somehow because of it. Carter had intended to diminish me through his actions. Instead, he had inadvertently created the circumstances for me to reclaim the strength and capability I had set aside for too long. "You know," I said with a small, genuine smile, "I think this might actually be the beginning of something better." Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.